All right. Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. I will be your moderator tonight. And my name is Evanique. And tonight we will have a presentation on the interview, the second part of the interview between Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyer, right, Brian?
Yes, episode 1.
Yes. So we will be doing the second half of that tonight. We ask everybody to go on mute. That way we can have the best sound quality. Um, and with that, Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Can everybody, well, let's see. If you can't hear me, please let us know. This is the second meetup for discussing the first episode of The Power of Myth. That's a series of 6 interviews led by Bill Moyers, interviewing Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell is a very well-known mythologist, well-known in the field, and his some of his views were captured within the 2 years before his death in a series of interviews that appeared on PBS. Each of the interviews ran about an hour, and we made it through one half of the first episode last time. We thought we'd be able to get through the whole thing, but it didn't work out that way. We spent 2 hours discussing the first 30 minutes. So I've decided, rather than doing once each month, I'm going to do one every 2 weeks. So we've had to move the time from Friday evening to Thursday evening. I thank you all for picking up on that. The discussion last time was obviously great. As I said at that point, a lot of people got a lot out of this series, and I did too when I first saw it. I'd already read a number of Joseph Campbell's books, some of them more than once, and was really happy to have this series. So one of my goals in this meetup is to hear from you all and what you're getting out of it, how, what meaning it might have for you, the insights it might offer, the epiphanies and the rest. I would really appreciate hearing that, and I'm sure the others would appreciate that too. I'm going to start out today with an introduction. I'm going to play the first 4 minutes of the episode. It's because I think it's a good introduction to our meetup today. It reminds you of what's the topic, and then I'll jump ahead to the second half of the episode the second half of the first episode, the material that we're going to discuss today. I'd also recommend, if you haven't, I spent a half hour talking about the whole series last time. I don't want to spend so much time on it today. But I'd recommend you look at the introduction that was posted to the meetup. It gives you a little background. These 4 minutes will give you a background. And then with that, I think we'll be ready to move ahead.
Joseph Campbell on the hero's adventure. He was the teacher everyone would like to have. He was the archetype, to use one of his favorite words, the original, the ideal. One of his students at Sarah Lawrence College, where Campbell taught for almost 40 years, described him as a beaming flashlight into the darkness. The director, George Lucas, said of Campbell, "If it hadn't been for him, it's possible I would still be trying to write Star Wars." When I met him late in his life, college students across the country had been reading Campbell's influential book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, for years. Scholars pored over his 4-volume study of mythology, The Mask of God. Now he was working on a monumental historical atlas of world mythology. Yet beyond the classroom and lecture halls, only a relative handful of people had ever seen Joseph Campbell in person or heard him speak. That changed with our series. As the broadcast played out over 6 consecutive weeks, the accumulating insight and wisdom had an enormous, unexpected impact. Thousands of letters poured into public television stations around the country. One that I received soon after the first broadcast from a woman in Kew Gardens, New York, summed up the collective reaction. She said, "I will never be the same." The series has been repeated over the years, and people continue to stop me in public to say simply, "Joseph Campbell changed my life." I say to all of them, yes, he was a great teacher. But
Okay, now I'm going to move ahead. I'll say a word or two before we start. I'll just remind you that this is Bill Moyers put together a series of rather open-ended questions, and it led to a rather free discussion of different topics, some directly related to the question, and some that are, tangentially or incidentally related. So I want you to feel free also to just listen and comment on anything that occurs to you as we go through these topics. There is a thread through each of the questions. The last thing I'll say is that also the use of words is not entirely consistent. That's another thing I have picked up on since the last presentation. So it's not, don't view this as a scholarly work that's that's going to be subject to peer review. It's really intended more as an inspirational piece for the general public, and I think it was very well received that way. So here we're going to play we're going to start out with a discussion of the mind as a secondary organ of the body. And I'll just remind everyone who was here last time that this follows on to a discussion of Jonah and the whale and Siegfried. Jonah was swallowed by the whale, going down into the unconscious and integrating, if you will, integrating his humanity, his body, with his mind, integrating the unconscious with the conscious. And the same is true in the Siegfried myth, when Siegfried kills the dragon being the powers of nature in this instance. And after killing the dragon, he drinks a bit of the blood, and in that way he integrates the powers of nature with his intellect and becomes more of a complete person. And now I'll start playing now. Joseph Campbell picks up on that dichotomy and discusses the mind as a secondary organ of the body. We'll go on for about 10 minutes and then we'll stop and discuss.
The first stage in the hero adventure, when he starts off on adventure, is leaving the realm of light, which he controls and knows about, and moving toward the threshold. And it's at the threshold that the monster of the abyss comes to meet him. And then there are 2 or 3 results. One, the hero is cut to pieces and descends into the abyss in fragments to be resurrected, or he may kill the dragon power, as Siegfried does when he kills the dragon, but then he tastes the dragon blood. That's say he has to assimilate that power. And when Siegfried has killed the dragon and tasted the blood, he hears the song of nature. He has transcended his humanity, and associated himself with the powers of nature, which are the powers of our life, from which our mind removes us. You see, this thing up here, this consciousness thinks it's running the shop. It's a secondary organ. It's a secondary organ of a total human being, and it must not put itself in control. It must submit and serve the humanity of the body.
Join the leader. And I will complete your dream.
When it does put itself in control, you get this father, the man who's gone over to the intellectual side.
I'll never join you. If you only knew the power of the dark side.
He isn't thinking or living in terms of humanity. He's living in terms of a system. And this is the threat to our lives. We all face it. We all operate in our society in relation to a system. Now, is the system going to eat you up and relieve you of your humanity? Or are you going to be able to use the system to human purposes?
Would the hero with 1,000 faces help us to answer that question about how to change the system so that we are not serving it?
I don't think it would help you to change the system, but it would help you to live in the system as a human being.
By doing what?
Well, like Luke Skywalker, not going over, but resisting its impersonal claims.
But I can hear someone out there in the audience saying, well, that's all well and good for the imagination of a George Lucas or for the scholarship of a Joseph Campbell, but that isn't what happens in my life.
You bet it does. If the person doesn't listen to the demands of his own spiritual and heart life and insists on a certain program, you're going to have a schizophrenic crack up. The person has put himself off center. He has aligned himself with a programmatic life, and it's not the one the body's interested in at all. But the world's full of people who have stopped listening to themselves. In my own life, I've had many opportunities to commit myself to a system and to go with it and to obey its requirements. My life has been that of a maverick. I would not submit.
You really believe that the creative spirit ranges on its own out there beyond the boundaries?
Yeah, I do.
Something of the hero in that. I don't mean to suggest that you see yourself as a hero.
No, I don't, but I see myself as a maverick.
So perhaps the hero lurks in each one of us when we don't know it.
Well, yes. I mean, our life evokes our character, and you find out more about yourself as you go on. And it's very nice to be able to put yourself in situations that will evoke your higher nature rather than your lower.
Give me an example.
I can give you a story. I'm dealing with an Iroquois story right now. There's a motif that comes in American Indian stories very often, what I call the refusal of suitors. A girl with her mother lived in a wigwam on the edge of the village. She was a very handsome girl, but extremely proud, and would not accept any of the boys. They proposed to her through the mother, and the mother was terribly annoyed with her. Well, one day they're out collecting wood, and they have gone a long way from the village. And while they are collecting the wood, a terrific darkness comes over them. Now, this wasn't the darkness of night descending. When you have a darkness like that, there's some magician at work somewhere. So the mother says, well, let's gather some bark and make a little wigwam, a bark wigwam for ourselves, and collect wood for a fire, and we'll just spend the night here. So they do that, and the mother falls asleep. And the girl looks, and there's this magnificent guy standing there with a wampum sash, glorious, and feathers and all this kind of black feathers. He says, I've come to marry you, and I'll await your reply. She accepts the guy, and the mother accepts the man. And he gives the mother the wampum belt to prove that he's serious about all this. So he goes away with the girl. She has acquiesced. Mere human beings weren't good enough for her, but here's something that really, so she's in another domain. Now the adventure is marvelous. She goes with him to his village, and they enter his lodge, the people in there greet her and she feels very comfortable about it and all. And then the next day he says, I'm going off to hunt. So he leaves the lodge and the door is closed with a flap. There's a flap. When he closes the flap, she hears a strange sound. So there's the whole day and she's just in the hut. And as evening comes, she hears that strange sound again. And the door flap is flung off, and in comes this prodigious serpent with his tongue darting, and he puts his head in her lap and says, now you must search my head for lice and things like that. She finds all kinds of horrible things there and kills them all. And then he withdraws, and in a moment, after the gate door has been closed, it opens again, and in he comes, the same beautiful young man again, and said, were you afraid of me when I came in just now? Look, she said, she wasn't at all afraid. Next day, he goes off to hunt. And then she leaves the lodge to gather wood. And the first thing she sees is an enormous serpent basking on the rocks. And then another, and then another. And she begins to feel very badly, very homesick and discouraged. Then the evening, the serpent, and then the man again. The third day, when he leaves, she decides she's going to try to get out of this place. So she goes out and she's standing in the woods thinking, and a voice speaks to her, and she turns and there's a little old man there. And he says, darling, you are in trouble. The man that you've married is one of 7 brothers. They are great magicians. And like many people of this kind, their hearts are not in their bodies. There is a collection of 7 hearts in a bag that is hidden under the bed of the eldest to whom you are married. You must go get that, and then we'll deal with the next part of the adventure. She goes in and finds a bag of hearts and is running out, and the voice calls after her, stop, stop. It's the voice of the magician. And she continues to run. He says, you may think you can get away from me, but you never can. And just at that point, she hears the voice of the old man. He says, I'll help you, dear. And he's pulling her out of the water. She didn't even know that she was in water.
What does that say to you?
That's to say you have moved out of the hard land, the solid earth, and are in the field of the unconscious. And she had pulled herself into the transcendent realm and got caught in the negative powers of the abyss. And she's being rescued now by the upper powers. What you have done has been to elevate yourself out of the local field and put yourself in a field of higher power, higher danger. And are you going to be able to handle it? If you are not eligible for this place into which you put yourself, it's going to be a demon marriage. It's going to be a real mess. If you are eligible, it can be a glory that will give you a life that is yours in your own way.
So these stories of mythology are simply trying to express a truth that can't be grasped any other way.
It's the edge, the interface between what can be known and what is never to be discovered, because it is a mystery transcendent of all human research. The source of life. What is it? No one knows.
Why are stories important for getting at that?
Well, I think it's important to live life with a knowledge of its mystery and of your own mystery. And it gives life a new zest, a new balance, a new harmony to do this. It's therapy and psychological therapy, when people find out what it is that's ticking in them, they get straightened out. And what is it that life is? I find thinking in mythological terms has helped people visibly. You can see it happen.
How? What does it do?
It erases anxieties. It puts them in accord with the inevitables of their life, and they can see the positive values of what are the negative aspects of what is positive. It's whether you're going to say no to the serpent or yes to the serpent. As easy as that.
No to the adventure?
Yeah, the adventure of being alive, of living.
When I was growing
Okay. I think I've stopped screen sharing. Is that true? Can everyone hear
Yes.
me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, well, there's definitely a lot going on in these 10 minutes. I was intrigued when the myth came out from North America, the Iroquois myth. I was puzzled as to its significance. So that's something I would really appreciate if someone could explain to me what the significance of that myth was or is to them, or how it strikes them. To me, it seems like an incomplete story, but maybe I'm wrong about that. So I'd be, I'm open to hearing about that, or to any of the other topics that were raised, either specifically or in general in the last 10 minutes.
So if anyone has any questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. And David's hand is first.
Yes, hi everyone. Look, to me, the situation is far more complicated, in my view, far worse than Joseph Campbell has painted it. You see, he seems to be painting in terms of you against the system. So to the degree that you're following your self, you're the hero. To me, that just seems too simplistic, far too simplistic. The system's already got us. Our very selves have been created by the system. I mean, the way I would personally put it is that our Christian civilization, with its Eurocentric Abrahamic culture, has conditioned us, indoctrinated us, and brainwashed us. So the point I'm making is that when you yourself are already divided between those aspects of yourself which the system has created, your very motivations, a lot of your feelings, a lot of your morality, etc. So you're already divided internally. So you yourself are part, well, the basic you, whatever that might be, and the system, that section of yourself created by the system. I mean, in a way you can put it in terms of the individual versus the collective, but that battle's already within you. The system's already got you. so and even then it's far more complicated, because the system itself is bifurcated, divided. For example, if the overwhelming ethos of the system is gung-ho capitalism, greed, but at the same time, your religious values, if they're put in terms of love and care for everybody, well, that's already, the system, the religion, creating you. So already the external system is divided between the greed and the love on the one hand, So that's all within you. And you yourself can find backup for your various sides in what the different aspects within the system teaches. So this internal war is going on within you. So that's all I'm saying. It's nowhere near as simple as that picture of you versus the system, because that battle's within you already. And each one of us faces it, between what the system's taught us. We may have analysed it or thought about it and decided it's ridiculous. But nevertheless, you're still fighting yourself. You're fighting what's, if there's some aspect of morality that you think is just outdated and stupid, well, you've already been conditioned into that morality. So the tension, the battle is already there within you. Anyway, it's enough from me.
Okay, I thought that's really very interesting. And it touches on obviously a lot of different topics, could be approached and addressed in different ways. I'm going to defer to others in the first instance for responding to David. Who is up next?
Up next is Bill, followed by Mona.
Thanks. I'm not sure I understood what David was saying, but it seemed that he was making the case that Joseph Campbell's model is either incomplete or inaccurate or incorrect. But I'm going to set to the side that kind of case and not really respond at all to what David was saying. I'm going to focus on the other possibility, or the other part of what Joseph Campbell was saying. I'm going to focus on the part of what Joseph Campbell was saying that struck me as accurate and helpful. So the following remarks really do not address David Miller's comments at all. I'm taking a completely different tack. So what I would say is that Joseph Campbell drew a distinction between things that are kind of unobservable and murky on one hand, versus things that are kind of concrete and clear, like what the myths are saying, like the characters and what they're doing, fighting a dragon, being swallowed by a whale. And I'd like to put on the table the hypothesis that the purpose of the concreteness of the myths with their characters and their plots and their actions is to give people kind of concrete ways to talk about things that are unobservable and murky, such as the things Joseph Campbell mentioned. The words he used was your heart, your spirit, your body's true path in life, as opposed to what your mind tells you. These are very murky, kind of not directly observable things, but the myths make them more concrete. And then what you do is you have a Joseph Campbell coming in and saying, well, what does this part of the myth mean? What's it referring to? It's referring to your spirit or your heart, or, getting beyond what your mind's telling you into what your body's telling you. There's like a reverse translation process. So I think in my own life, I've experienced a lot of the things Joseph Campbell was talking about. I find it a very helpful way of thinking about myth, and I find lots of myths helpful. So I thought I'd put those ideas on the table. The key idea being the myths are concrete. They help us put into words things that are not concrete so we can talk about them and learn about them individually and together. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
That was great. And yes, I do see a difference there between the things that are not concrete, like the heart. That's already if you talk about the heart, that's kind of a metaphor for something that's kind of not concrete, that's going on in our lives. And the narrative is a great way to get at that. It's really, I think, over the ages proven itself to be a great way to get at that. It's the manifestation of whatever this capacity is as it interacts with life. And whoever has the comments, don't feel tied to responding to the others. Please make your points. Do you want to follow up, please?
Yeah, could I just add one very brief thing that I forgot to add, which is that it's all about navigation. Myths are navigation tools, helping people navigate so that they navigate toward what serves themselves and those around them, and navigate away from things that don't serve them and themselves and don't serve others. It's all about navigation tools. So I'll stop there. Thanks for listening.
Well, I'll just say then that brings me back to the myth that he selected to talk about. And again, it's the discussion here that between Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell is rather open-ended, but the that you gravitate towards the things that you serve you is, it's not in that myth. It seemed like the young bride gravitated towards the one man, and that she was able to handle that, and that served her. But then when the whole family presented itself as magicians in the form of snakes, that was no longer serving her, and she wanted to get away from it. So I don't, again, that myth is a kind of a puzzlement to me in the way he presented it. So does anybody else want to comment?
Yes, we have Mona followed by Wawan, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. Mona?
Yes, thank you, Evanique. Thank you, Brian. Oh, wow, I have so much to say. First, in regards to how the system gets us. The system gets us when we take it for real as if it's the only thing that it is. And then how the myths open the door to the understanding that not everything is what it seems to be, like particularly in the myth that was presented in the story of the, like the man who was turned into a snake or whatever, a family of snakes. So it opens the door to the possibility of realizing that not everything that we see is what it actually is. And then how is that helpful? That's another story, but I think that just going with the adventure brings you to the point of understanding that if you are in that place where you know that not everything is what it seems to be, then you can deal with the reality of the system and you're not caught in it. And at that point, you're free from it. Not that you can escape in a different world, you're still in the system, but you're not caught in it. So I think to that extent, the language of the myths is very helpful, because it allows you to have a voice for that kind of understanding that there's something else that we can't possibly capture. That's my view. And I could go on and on and on. I mean, this is all very consistent with the Buddhist stories. This is what Buddha did. He went into the forest and then he explored his own unconscious and his own mind. And then what did he do? He returned to the village. So that's my my understanding of it.
Well, thank you. It'd be great if you came back and said more about, maybe recover from your cough and say more about the other things. But let me ask David, does that help you at all with Mona's comment that if you can see the current system as just an alternative and not a necessity, does that help address your concern? And the myth unlocks that realization to you and creates some freedom in terms of your alternatives and behavior.
Well, once again, it's more complicated because the system, as I was pointing out, is already bifurcated, but has various aspects, because we've got our whole human history and all the different stages we've been through throughout history, and they've all got their own myths, their own spin, to put it in more harsh terms, their own propaganda, which backs up their particular outlook, their particular morality. And we've got all that within us from our, conditioning, indoctrination, brainwashing. It's all there. And so you've got rival myths, and you yourself can pick at any particular moment, whatever aspect of yourself which is dominant, you can pick the myth that's going to back up the story, that's going to back up whatever it is that you might desire at this particular moment. You can find some justification, some underpinning, some rationalization, which will back up. So it's, it's quite complicated.
Okay, so there's more of a back and forth in all of this. Does anyone else have comments? Does anyone else? I can't see who's posted to talk.
Yeah. We have Wawan is next.
Oh,
Did I say that correctly?
yeah. For this topic about the power of myth by Joseph Campbell, we can get about fundamentally about myths sometimes offer life models, but the models have to appropriate that you are living now, and our time and also my time has changed so fast because yeah, English this work can offer instantly about how to do that, and the figures of the past are the faces of today, and also the other have a moral. The moral has to catch up with the moral necessities and to live in time, and now. So about past, present, and now, and sometimes this is related to all kind of religion that believe about X or your ethnics or your race or your country. But I think that all of this participant on this meeting are American, and you know, I am not American, but I know a lot about neural of this story about this topic today, and you know, in base of this material for today, I I now I am amazed about this topic, but Campbell always present is ideas about mythology, about mythology in human society, and maybe in the next time I see 52 living still providing about the power of myth. So I am waiting for the next topic in next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was an interesting insight that the myths of the past are the basis of today. That was an interesting point. Who has a next? Who is up next?
Up next, we have Bill.
Thanks. I'm appreciating what David Miller is bringing to the conversation, and I'm appreciating also, I think Katie J in the chat is making similar comments, and I'm trying to make sense of it, and this is what I'm coming up with. That it's important to distinguish between two very different functions of myth, spiritual traditions, religion, etc., etc., etc. One function is social control, to restrain the individual from engaging in behaviors that are detrimental to his or her community, to those around him. Okay, let's just call that the social control function. Okay, the other function, which is very different, is to enable the individual to do what Joseph Campbell is talking about, which is to integrate feelings from the heart and thoughts from the unconscious, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to live a more embodied life. You know, I'm just repeating all the things Joseph Campbell was talking about. And that's like a personal, inward, individual function of myth, spiritual traditions, religion, etc. And those two functions are just very, very different in terms of their benefit cost structure. You know, the first function, the benefit, is that it restrains the individual. And the cost is that, as David Miller points out, is that it kind of represses the individual. The second, the benefit, is that it kind of liberates the individual to get in touch with their own inner workings. But the cost is, I'll have to think about that. But the point is that once you separate these two functions and look at myth from one or the other function, it seems to me you've got to look at it from the point of view of one of these functions at a time and understand that, and then look at it from the point of view of the other function alone and understand that. And then you can start to talk about how the functions overlap and interact, etc. But you got to get the separate analysis down straight for each function separately from the other. To really understand what's going on when they start interacting. So that would be my suggestion. And thanks for listening.
That's an interesting thought. That maybe in some ways it's inevitable that our personal integration you talk about occurs through the different cultures we live in, the different cultural inflections of the human nature, and that to become integrated and achieve the kind of ability to express yourself in the culture you're thrown into, as I think David is pointing at, requires to some extent an acceptance of the culture, which I think Bill is pointing out. The social control is the personal interface of that would be acceptance, and then but moving beyond acceptance to mastery, and then virtuosity. Virtuosity is being able to express your freedom, express yourself fully, using these cultural memes, if I can put it that way. And the myth, in some ways, points to that development. Does that mean anything to you, Bill?
Yeah, what you said makes sense.
Anybody else?
Up next, we have Penny.
Yes, very interesting conversation. The way I kind of was seeing it, I mean, clearly each human is born into a society and they're only able to survive because of that. So the society is going to implant a lot of beliefs and a system of order and ideas about how things work to them. But I see the myths as providing an opening to another reality, which the system tends to just ignore and say doesn't exist, that the system is everything. And the fact that if you see through the myth that this system exists, but it's not everything, that your own personal feelings and ways of looking at the world are valid and provide insight that goes beyond the system, then that opens the door for you to, as they would say, like the unconscious or something, for you to develop your own interpretation of the world, which is valid and which is really a way to help the world and yourself. And as they had said one time, the creative spirit is kind of outside, it's out there. I think the feeling that that the myth provides an opportunity for you to say, I don't have to believe everything in the system. I realize that it exists and that there are benefits and there are things against it, but it's valid that I feel, like a connection with nature, and that nature really is a dominant force in the world. I think that myth allows us to open up and to start discovering those other truths. And kind of like in the story with the bride, although I don't think he told the whole story. I think that after she escapes from the snakes, there's something else that happens. I mean, I think she goes back to her tribe or something, and it imparts some kind of wisdom to them. But she's looking at a person that looks like a person, but then you see it really isn't. So then you're going into that other world. Even though on the first aspect, it looked just like the system, and this is a really great guy. But then she realizes actually that she's not in the world of the system, but is in the unconscious and a deeper world.
Yeah, I would agree that the story is incomplete. I guess I could look it up and try to find it. Because I think it probably does continue along the lines that Penny pointed to. So I want to play the next bit here, the next 10 minutes.
Brian, I wanted to say something about what Penny said really quick.
Yeah, okay.
I agree with Penny where I think, if you realize that it's a myth, you get to choose how to apply it to your life. Like, it's not even the simple fact that you may or may not believe it. It's like, can you apply it to your life? Like, how does this give value to your life or help you through whatever myth it is? And I think if it helps you, it's worth it in that, you just don't accept it because the system tells you to, even though which somebody else pointed out, there is a purpose to the system. And that's one thing to note too, is that there is a purpose to the system. It does bring a sense of order, but you got to know to think for yourself. And number two, I think with the story of the Native American girl and the snakes, and it being incomplete, I always think of the story that I read back in high school, The Lady or the Tiger. And I say that because The Lady or the Tiger was incomplete as well. It was deliberately done so because it makes the reader choose what happens. So quickly, for anybody that doesn't know, a princess falls in love with a common man, and the father's mad. The father puts the common man in the arena, and in the arena you get to choose one door or the other, but you don't know what is in which. The lady is in one, but if it's the lady, the person has to marry that lady. If it's the tiger, obviously the person's dead, right? The princess finds out which door the lady in the tiger is in, and then she says, and then so she signals to the her lover which door, and he'll pick that door thinking it's the lady. But the question then comes in, um did she give him the lady? Did she choose the lady or the tiger to show him? Because if she chose the lady, that means he has to marry her and it's over anyway. And if she chooses the tiger, he's dead and no one else gets him. Which one does the lady choose? And it leaves it just like that. And it's up to the reader to decide. So it could be one of those things where it's just deliberately incomplete. And then you make up the ending.
Interesting. I don't want to preclude further discussion on what we heard in the last 10 minutes, but I want to add to it the next 10 minutes, which are they don't really go to a different topic. They expand on the same topic, bringing up different aspects. The I guess I will kind of echo again David's comment because it'll help me introduce the next topic. The next one is, I'll just say episode 2, not what we're going to see now, but next time. Episode 2 is the meaning of myth. And the subtitle is Suffering, Sacrifice, and Redemption. And there, I think already you can see maybe the point that David's making is that the meaning of myth is already given the kind of a Christian inflection with the sacrifice, suffering, sacrifice, and redemption. To me, it immediately, that subtitle evoked the idea of Christ or Jesus dying on the cross, and the way that Christians understand that. So there's that's culture has influenced the way that episode 2 is being presented, but it also it present maybe those concepts of sacrifice, suffering, and redemption point to something that's more universal in all of life. But I want to present now, and I'm using this as a segue because this next bit now talks about dragons, and that's not really a Christian. So this is a very different mythological background, and it just shows that you can use also other myths and other myth traditions to point at some of these topics. So let me, again, I'm not precluding continuation from the last, but let me add this next 10 minutes to the discussion.
I got tales of King Arthur, tales of the medieval knights, tales of the dragon slayers were very strong in my world.
Dragons represent greed, really. The European dragon guards things in his cave, and what he guards are heaps of gold and virgins. And he can't make use of either of them, but he just guards. There's no vitality of experience, either of the value of the gold or of the female whom he's guarding there. Psychologically, the dragon is one's own binding of oneself to one's ego, and you're captured in your own dragon cage. And the power of the psychiatrist is to break that dragon, open him up, so that you can have a larger field of relationships. Jung had a patient come to him who felt alone, and she drew a picture of herself as caught in the rocks. From the waist down, she was bound in rocks, and this was on a windy shore, and the wind blowing and her hair blowing, and all the gold, which is the sign of the vitality of life, was locked in the rocks. And the next picture that he had her draw had followed something he had said to her. Suddenly, a lightning flash hit the rocks, and the gold came pouring out. And then she found reflected on rocks round about the gold. And there was no more gold in the rocks. It was all available on the top. And in the conferences that followed, those patches of gold were identified. They were her friends. She wasn't alone, but she had locked herself in her own little room and life, but she had friends. Do you see what I'm meaning? This is killing the dragon. And you have fears and things. This is the dragon. That's exactly what that's all about. At least the European dragon. Chinese dragon is different.
What is it?
It represents the vitality of the swamps, and the dragon comes out beating his belly and saying, ha, 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 ha. You know, that's another kind of dragon. And he's the one that yields the bounty and the waters and all that kind of thing. He's the great, glorious thing. But this is the negative one that cuts down.
So what you're saying is if there are not dragons out there, and there may not be
The real dragon is in you.
What is that real dragon?
That's your ego holding you in.
What's my ego?
What I want, what I believe, what I can do, what I think I love, and all that. What I regard as the aim of my life and so forth. It might be too small. It might be that which pins you down. And if it's simply that of doing what the environment tells you to do, it certainly is pinning you down. And so the environment is your dragon as it reflects within yourself.
How do I slay?
How do you
slay that dragon in me? What's the journey I have to make? You have to make. Each of us has to make. You talk about something called the soul's high adventure.
My general formula for my students is follow your bliss. I mean, find where it is and don't be afraid to follow it.
Can my bliss be my life, love, or my life's work? Is it my work or my life?
Well, if the work that you're doing is the work that you chose to do because you are enjoying it, that's it. But if you think, oh, gee, I couldn't do that, you know, that's your dragon. It's locking you in. Oh, no, I couldn't be a writer. Oh, no, I couldn't do what so-and-so is doing.
Unlike the classical heroes, we're not going on our journey to save the world, but to save ourselves.
And in doing that, you save the world. I mean, you do. The influence of a vital person vitalizes. There's no doubt about it. The world is a wasteland. People have the notion of saving the world by shifting it around and changing the rules and so forth. And no, any world is a living world if it's alive. And the thing is to bring it to life. And the way to bring it to life is to find in your own case where your life is and be alive yourself, it seems to me.
That's the power of the teacher, isn't it? To bring vitality to others, to make others see the vitality in them, children.
Well, it happens. That's one of the delights of teaching. I mean, when you're not teaching in order to have an easy job, but because you really have something to teach and you love young people and you want to give what you've got found to them. And to see them come alive is the reward of teaching.
You say I have to take that journey and go down there and slay those dragons. Do I have to go alone?
If you have someone who can help you, that's fine too. But ultimately, the last trick has to be done by you.
In all of these journeys of mythology, there's a place everyone wishes to find. What is it? The Buddhists talk of nirvana. Jesus talks of peace. There's a place of rest and repose. Is that typical of the hero's journey? That there's a place to find?
That's a place in yourself of rest. Now, this I know a little bit about from athletics. The athlete who is in championship form has a quiet place in himself. And it's out of that his action comes. If he's all in the action field, he's not performing properly. There's a center out of which you act. And Jean, my wife, a dancer, tells me that in dance, this is true too. There's the center that has to be known and held. There, it's quite physically recognized by the person. But unless this center has been found, you're torn apart. Tension comes. Now, the Buddha's word is nirvana. Nirvana is a psychological state of mind. It's not a place like heaven. It's not something that's not here. It is here in the middle of the turmoil, what's called samsara, the whirlpool of life conditions. That nirvana is what? It is the condition that comes when you are not compelled by desire or by fear or by social commitments. When you hold your center and act out of there,
And like all heroes, the Buddha doesn't show you the truth, the illumination. He shows you the way to
the way. But it's got to be your way too. I mean, how should I get rid of fear? The Buddha can't tell me how I'm going to do it. There are exercises that different teachers will give you, but they may not work for you. And all a teacher can do is give you a clue of the direction. He's like a lighthouse that says there are rocks over here and steer clear.
You talk a lot about consciousness.
Yes.
Most people hear that term.
Okay, hope everyone can hear me. We'll talk about consciousness as the last frame. It talks about, and I do hope to get to that today, consciousness in individuals and even in consciousness of the planet. But again, he just touched on so many different topics today. The one that really struck in these last 10 minutes of discussion, the one that really I really liked was that I got a lot out of initially and even today, is that the piece, which I think is I've in a lot of the wisdom traditions I've looked at, I've paid attention to the texts, and if there's any kind of reasoning or explanation of why this is a wise thing to do, or why we want to follow this path, it usually ends up because this will give you peace or rest. So it does seem that wisdom traditions, all of them seem to value, at least the ones I've looked at, value this idea. And what Joseph Campbell adds by referring to Buddha is that this peace and rest, it has to be here and now. If it's not here now, it's not going to be anywhere. And it's you in the midst of all the tumult, including your own actions. So to me, that was really touched me when I first heard it, and I still think it's very profound today. Anyone else?
Up next, we have Mike, followed by Mona. And if anyone else has any questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Mike, you're up.
Okay, the commonality of a lot of these things is that if you stay with this long enough, you're going to find twists and turns that make it an unhappy ending. And then if you stay with it even longer, you'll have a happy ending. He started out with Luke Skywalker in this thing, and that went through a lot of twists of the dark side. But, Luke Skywalker eventually found out that Darth Vader was his father, and there was a real reunion of sorts. And so there was sort of a happy ending. This marriage of the lily princess, of the water lily, the Indian princess, it went on with further twists that she it started to have an unhappy ending, and she ran away, and she had help along the way, and eventually, like in the mythology of Beauty and the Beast, she eventually learned how to love this guy again, and it had a happy ending. And that's true about all of these things. If you stay with these long enough, it's going to be a disaster, and if you stay with it even longer, it'll have a happy ending. I believe that the marriage of the water lily, she eventually ran back to her father. Her father got sick and turned out to be nearly die, and the snake could go down and find a cure for through his venom for the image that that her father had, and she eventually had a happy ending. So the twists and turns of this mythology is in every one of his stories, and it is a hero's journey. And actually, the Greek tragedies or Greek stories about the Odyssey and so forth eventually are parallel to this thing, that they take you through the images of life that that take you from disasters to happy endings. And the idea is to that underneath the tragedy, there's a happy ending if you look for it and you stay with it long enough. Now, that's I don't understand all of the complexities, but Jung's Red Book also talks about some of these unhappy how things have happy endings and unhappy endings, and how to sort all that out. So I yield the balance of my time because I don't totally understand what even what I just said. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. The very interesting to me. Well, the issue of happy endings is, I think, a good one. I'll just leave it at that and turn it over to the next. Does anybody else have comments?
Up next is Mona.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the second part, the second video that you played, the second part of the video with the discussion about Buddha, because this has been on my mind. I kept wanting to say more about it, but I liked very much the explanation of nirvana, the psychological state where we're not swayed by fear or desire. And it struck me that that's precisely how the society, or like the structure of the machine kind of keeps you imprisoned because of the desire and because of the fear. So if one gets to a place, whether you call it peace, whether you call it nirvana, whether you call it, I don't know what you want to call it, but where the desires and the fears do not seem to sway you, then that can lead to more wisdom into how to deal with the realities of the world that we live in, and then can bring up compassion and can be of benefit to others, and it can be alive. So I really appreciated this whole, because it makes a lot of sense to me.
Excellent, thank you. And he also touched on, the fear, desire, and social commitment. If you're aware of the commitments that the system's putting on you, just maybe through that awareness, you attain some distance, and that gives you the freedom, the peace of the space that you talked about, that others are referred to as the peace of mind, allowing you to be compassionate. Okay, who's up next?
That's all the commenters we have.
Anyone else?
Katie
Can I
and
ask
Penny.
a kind of a clarifying question? This idea of journey kind of invokes to me this idea of going somewhere, like going on a physical journey, but there, as Mona was saying, like this idea that it's more of a a psychological state of mind. I don't quite understand this idea of the journey and distance.
I guess my reaction would be, and it's something he pointed to in the earlier discussion, is that through the experiences that you have in your life, you experience maturation, integration of your understanding, feeling, and action. So that's the outward journey is your actions and what you're doing, but the inward part, the inward journey, is this integration that I think Jung refers to as individuation. becoming more of a complete person. So does that help?
Yeah, because I don't think you would have to literally physically embark somewhere to have to undergo this inner.
Oh yeah, I would definitely agree with that. But the idea is that you inevitably come into contact with the world, you encounter the world. And beyond that, you're going to encounter some well, again, this gets into the happy ending issues and dragons, but you're going to encounter some risk, some loss in your life, and the challenge is making sense of that. So you don't have to travel anywhere. You don't have to go anywhere. And so this might be an overstatement, but you don't have to do anything because life is going to come at you. You don't have to go out of your way to find it. And life is embedded in you, just your aging, your feelings, your desires, all these things that are pointed at in this discussion. They're going to be coming at you, and then you're challenged to deal with that and integrate it in a satisfying fashion. So that's my reaction. Katie, do you have further comments?
Yeah, I agree with you that you'll be presented enough situations that you don't have to book a ticket anywhere.
Yeah, Penny had something.
Yes, and followed by Bill.
I just wanted to say I was really struck when he was talking about like going on journeys to save the world, and that you don't save the world by rearranging things and doing things to like the physical world. You save the world by saving yourself, by becoming alive and vital, and then vital people influence the world. And I just was kind of intrigued by that because we're faced with so many issues right now that seem kind of insurmountable. And if you kind of have the belief actually that each person has the capacity to start solving problems by finding your own person, I just thought that was a fascinating idea.
Okay, anybody else?
Up next, we have Bill.
Thanks. Penny's last comment reminded me of a saying I heard somewhere along the line. I cannot tell you where I heard it from, but I think the saying goes like this: change begins within. So I want to try to give an answer to Katie's question about the word journey and what it might mean in this context, and including the conundrum of like, it cannot possibly mean a physical journey from geographical location A to geographical location B, because as Katie said, or as I thought I understood her saying, you don't need to like move from geographical place A to geographical place B to do the journey Joseph Campbell's talking about. So why use the word journey, right? So I would start with Joseph Campbell's use of the word unconscious and his proposition that there is a disconnect between the mind and the body, or between the mind and the heart, and the way to reconnect is to learn what is in one's unconscious in terms of thoughts and feelings, or what the Buddha would call like conditioned thoughts and conditioned feelings, fears, aversions, desires, and kind of seeing through those things from first seeing those desires and aversions that are initially one's not aware of, and in that sense one is unconscious of, but starting to see them and then see through them and get beyond them, and that to get to that inner place of rest that Joseph Campbell talked about, And in that sense, I think of like a hurricane with like the eye of the hurricane is very calm, but it's surrounded by clouds and storm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So why use the word journey for this? Well, I would answer that in this way. The word journey to describe the process of learning about one's unconscious thoughts and feelings, it's a journey in the following sense. It cannot possibly happen all at once because that would be overwhelming. So it has to happen over time, which means it has a sequence to it. One becomes aware of some thoughts and some feelings early in the process, others late in the process. And in that sense, it's like a geographical journey from point A to point B, you know, it's got a sequence to it where you pass certain, you know, fields and farms and cities and whatever, you know, it's similar in that sense. It's got a sequence and there's things you encounter. And then it's also like a journey in the sense that, you know, one learns about thoughts and feelings the first time, and then those thoughts and feelings come up again, and it's like being transported back to that same place in the inner journey again, and feeling that same thought and same feeling again. So it's like a revisit, kind of, if you're going to use the word, the phrase journey. So it's kind of, I probably shouldn't say anything more about it, because folks who've been on that journey probably resonate with what I'm saying. Folks who've not been on that journey much or at all, they might understand the dictionary definitions of the words I'm using, but not have much or any personal experience of what it's like to really learn about one's own conditioned thoughts and conditioned feelings. So, but in any case, that's why I think the inner journey does have a journey aspect to it. It's like there's a certain travel through different, you know, terrain with different features, emotional features, cognitive features, etc. So I'll stop there. Thanks for listening.
Katie, how did you like that?
That was fantastic.
Excellent. Who's up? Anyone up next?
Up next is Mark.
Thanks, and I'm sorry I had to come in late, but Bill, since you were waxing so poetically about the journey, how do we know when we're on that journey? Or are we always on it?
I'm not a spiritual teacher. I'm not a meditation teacher. I'm not a guru. I'm not a master. I'm just a guy trying to learn how to live my life. So I can't really answer. I guess the only thing I would say is there's different methods to go on the journey. You know, there's Stoic philosophy, there's Buddhism, there's religions, there's the mystical tradition in each religion, there's the more you know, social collective activity branch of each religion. There's all sorts of other, there's self-help books. There's methods, you know, each method has its own metrics for knowing what, for identifying what you're seeing on your journey and having like verbal handles to grab it by, you know, pick a method and it's got its metrics. So, and those metrics will tell you how to know what part of the journey you're on and what you're seeing there. So that's how I would frame it there.
Mark? How was that? The person who asked.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian and Bill. I think I hear what you're saying about all the different ways in which we can undertake this journey and all the different paths. And I guess what I was wondering was whether we're always unfailingly on this journey or on a journey, or if we may only come to engage in this journey at a certain point.
May I respond?
Yes. Sabrina.
So yes, you're always on the journey, because life, it's trying to take you, you know, into these hero journey all the time, right? But you know when you are want to say overcoming or growing. When you start to understand yourself better, and when the challenge comes, the next dragon to slay shows up, and the way you deal with it. So if you see a difference from how you did it in the past to how you are doing it now, I think that's what starts to show you that you're going in the direction that you want. Because you have learned how to handle what shows up emotionally. So you have more your inner self, you have more knowledge of that. So that things don't rattle you as easily, and you learn to have perspective on what shows up, and you have more control. And I don't want to say control, because we're not trying to control emotions, we're trying to get to know them, right? But your reaction to what is happening, you learn just to deal with things easier and easier. So that's how you know you're going in a direction that it's prefer. At least that's my experience.
Let's see. I think who asked that question? Was that Mark?
Yes, that was Mark.
You have a follow-up comment or question?
Well, I loved Sabrina's answer. I was just, gonna listen to what other people had to say.
Anyone else?
That's all we have.
I have one thing I'd like to add, and I'd like to get, some reaction to it. I don't want it to be consider it the last word, but it's this idea about dragons. I think the dragon it's the same dragon in both the European and the Chinese. It's Jordan Peterson presents it, or claims that the mythical the dragon is a mythical presentation of the unknown, and I think I agree with that. The European one is where you are fearful, and where the knight or the person encountering the dragon is fearful and sees it as a risk, and it may well be a risk. The Chinese one, it's the unknown, but hey, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. And there are good things that come at you from the unknown, not just bad things. And that's one thing I picked up from this presentation. I think there's kind of a slant that the unknown is dangerous. They talk about the unconscious, that's the unknown, and then there are dangerous animals in the unknown. But that's true, but there can also be very good and helpful animals in the unknown, and it depends to some extent on the character of the animal and also on your ability to master it. So I think that's I think just kind of the bottom line, the dragon is the same, and it just depends on what's coming at you from the unknown. Is it a risk that you cannot master? That could be an unhappy ending, Mike Soren. And you'll get cut to shreds, like Joseph Campbell said in an earlier interview, and sink to the bottom of the ocean. But that's just a metaphor. You know what? That's just your old self. You'll still be there. You can come up with another myth and encounter other dragons. So that's, you can encounter the dragon that's dangerous and you cannot handle, but you might be encountering a very beneficial and beneficent dragon or one that presents risks that you can master. The other bit to it, I think, is that usually in these journeys that are presented, the person that's going out, if you will, the hero, so that would be us in the metaphor, we're not going out to kill the dragon. We're going out for some other reason, another purpose, a different purpose. It might just be to free the virgin or collect the gold, but it's not to kill the dragon. And I think the metaphor carries over into life in that you need a purpose that makes encountering the dragon worthwhile. I don't think the sum and substance of the journey is to encounter and kill a dragon. I think that's just a part of some of the journeys. And I think that that's a little bit negative in this presentation. And I think it's become very negative in some of the things Jordan Peterson has said lately. That you have to pick up and carry your cross. You need a good reason to pick up and carry a cross. You just don't pick up and carry crosses. And he's weeping in front of people because I think he has a very limited, at the moment, a very limited understanding of even what he himself has been talking about. So I'll just stop there if anybody has any reactions to that.
If anyone has any questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Brian, I don't see anybody, so I think we're good.
All right, so we'll go on to the next, the last 10 minutes, and there he does turn the page a bit. He starts talking about consciousness, but then animal consciousness, plant consciousness, consciousness of the earth, and what the mythologies of the future might look like. So this is just a wrap up of the first episode. The second episode I'm going to start next week. That's going to be the meaning of myth. It'll touch on similar topics, but from different angle, and the format will be the same. Very open-ended questions from Bill Moyers, wide-ranging answers from Joseph Campbell, and it's not repetitive. It'll be a very different presentation and raise other very good topics for discussion. So I'll play this, then that'll be the end, and then we'll discuss this last bit, and then that'll be the wrap up for today. All right, let's see, share screen.
Chairman like me have only a veiled understanding of it. What is it?
Gene and I are living in Hawaii, and we're living right by the ocean. And we have a little lanai, a little porch. And there's a coconut tree that grows up through that porch, and it goes on up. And there's a kind of vine plant, a big powerful thing with leaves like this, that has grown up the coconut tree. Now that plant sends forth little feelers to go out and clutch the plant, and it knows where the plant is and what to do, and where the tree is, and it grows up like this, and it opens a leaf, and that leaf immediately turns to where the sun is. Now you can't tell me that leaf doesn't know where the sun is going to be. All of the leaves go just like that, what's called heliotropism, turning toward where the sun is. That's a form of consciousness. There is a plant consciousness. There is a animal consciousness. And we share all of these things. You eat certain foods and the bile knows whether there's something there for it to go to work on. I mean, this whole thing is consciousness. I begin to feel more and more that the whole world is conscious. Certainly the vegetable world is conscious. And when you live in the woods, as I did as a kid, you can see all these different consciousnesses relating to themselves. Now, it is a part of the sort of Cartesian mode to think of consciousness as being something peculiar to the head, that this is the organ originating consciousness. It isn't. It's an organ that inflects consciousness to a certain direction, a certain set of purposes. But there's a whole consciousness here in the body. And the whole living world is informed by consciousness. I have a feeling that consciousness and energy are the same thing somehow. Where you really see energy, there is consciousness.
Scientists are beginning to talk quite openly about the Gaia principle.
There you are, the whole planet as an organism.
Mother Earth.
And you see, if you will think of ourselves as coming out of the earth, rather than as being thrown in here from somewhere else, you know, thrown out of the earth. We are the earth. We are the consciousness of the earth. These are the eyes of the earth. And this is the voice of the earth. What else?
How do we raise our consciousness?
Well, that's a matter of what you are disposed to think about. And that's what meditations are for. And all of life is a meditation, most of it unintentional. A lot of people spend most of it in meditating on where their money's coming from and where it's going to go, but that's a level of meditation. Or if you have a family to bring up, you're concerned for the family. These are all perfectly very important concerns, but they have to do with physical conditions mostly, and spiritual conditions of the children, of course. But how are you going to communicate spiritual consciousness to the children if you don't have it yourself? So how do you get that? Then you think about the myths. What the myths are for is to bring us into a level of consciousness that is spiritual. Just for example, I walk off 52nd Street and Fifth Avenue into St. Patrick's Cathedral. I've left a very busy city, and one of the most fiercely economically inspired cities on the planet. I walk into that cathedral, and everything around me speaks of spiritual mystery. The mystery of the cross, what's that all about there? The stained glass windows, which bring another atmosphere in. My consciousness has been brought up onto another level altogether. And I am on a different platform. And then I walk out and I'm back in this one again. Now, can I hold something from that? Well, certain prayers or meditations that are associated with the whole context there. These are what are called mantras in India, little meditation themes that hold your consciousness on that level instead of letting it drop down here all the way. And then what you can finally do is to recognize that this is simply a lower level of that.
The cathedral at Chartres, which you love so much, also expresses a relationship of the human to the cosmos, doesn't it?
Well, I think everyone who has spent any time at Chartres has felt something very special about this cathedral. I've been there about 8 times. When I was a student in Paris, I went down there about 5 times and spent one whole weekend, and I identified and looked at every single figure in that cathedral. I was there so much that the concierge, this little old fellow who took care of the cathedral, he came to me one noontime and he said, would you like to go up with me and ring the bells? I said, I sure would. So we climbed the Flish, the tower, up to where the great bell was, the great enormous bronze bell. And there was a little, like a seesaw. And he stood on one end of the seesaw, and I stood on the other end of the seesaw. And there was a little bar there for us to hold on to. He gave the thing a push, and then he was on it, and I was on it. We started going up and down, and the wind blowing through our hair up there in the cathedral. And then it began underneath. Bong, bong. I tell you, it was one of the most thrilling adventures in my life. And when it was all over, he brought me down. He said, I want to show you where my room is. Well, in a cathedral, you have the nave, and then the transept, and then the apse. And around the apse is the choir screen. Now, the choir screen in charge is about that wide. And he took me in a little door into the middle of the choir screen, and there was his little bed and a little table with a lamp on it. And when I looked out, there was the Black Madonna, the vitrine, the window of the Black Madonna, and that was where he lived. There was a man living in a meditation, a constant meditation. I mean, that was a very moving, beautiful thing. Well, I've been there time and time again since.
What do you find when you go there? What does it say about all that we've been discussing?
Well, the first thing it says is it takes me back to a time when these principles informed the society. I mean, you can tell what's informing the society by the size of what the building is that's the tallest building in the place. When you approach a medieval town, the cathedral's the tallest thing in the place. When you approach a 17th century city, it's the political palace that's the tallest thing in the place. And when you approach a modern city, it's office buildings and dwellings that are the tallest things in the place. And if you go to Salt Lake City, you'll see the whole thing illustrated right in front of your face. First, the temple was built. The temple was built right in the center of the city. I mean, this was the proper organization. That's the spiritual center from which all flows in all directions. And then the Capitol was built right beside the temple. And it's bigger than the temple. And now the biggest thing is the office building that takes care of the affairs of both the temple and the political building. That's the history of Western civilization, from the Gothic through the princely periods of the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries to this economic world that we're in now.
In New York now, the debate is over who can build the tallest building, not to praise, but to build the tallest building.
Yeah, and they are magnificent. I mean, some of the things that are going up in New York now really are. And this is a kind of architectural triumph. And what it is the statement of the city. We are a financial power center, and look what we can do. It's a kind of virtuosic acrobatic stunt.
Will new myths come from there?
Well, something might. You can't predict what a myth is going to be any more than you can predict what you're going to dream tonight. Myths and dreams come from the same place. They come from realizations of some kind that have then to find expression in symbolic form. And the only myth that's going to be worth thinking about in the immediate future is one that's talking about the planet, not this city, not these people, but the planet and everybody on it. That's my main thought for what the future myth is going to be. And what it will have to deal with will be exactly what all myths have dealt with. The maturation of the individual, the gradual, the pedagogical way to follow from dependency through adulthood to maturity, and then to the exit, and how to do it. And then how to relate to this society, and how to relate this society to the world of nature and the cosmos. That's what the myths have all talked about. That's what this one's got to talk about. But the society that it's got to talk about is the society of the planet. And until that gets going, you don't have anything.
There's that wonderful photograph you have of the Earth seen from space. And it's very small, and at the same time, it's very grand.
You don't see any divisions there of nations or states or anything of the kind. This might be the symbol, really, for the new mythology to come. That is the country. that we are going to be celebrating. And those are the people that we are one with.
Okay, that's the last segment for this evening. Any comments?
I have one.
Yes.
So I think the starting from the end where you see the Earth from space, and he's describing that there are no nations like marked off. You can't see the markings of the nations or where they are. So to me, it just shows that this is something that we all made up as human beings. That really it is just one Earth. And yes, there are different sections of the Earth, but we did the naming. I think we talked about that in the Tao Te Ching, the 10,000 names. We gave it all names. We gave it all myths. We gave it all religions. Like this is something that human beings have made up, and that it's not all bad. And then I think going back to where he visits the chapel, and he visits the I forget the name that he uses, but he visits the man's room, and the first thing that he sees is like all these things in just one little bed, and he said he lives his life in meditation. He looks across and you can see the Black Madonna, and he lives it in meditation. And I think about it, and I think about it, and I'm like, even though these myths are made by men, right? That doesn't mean that they're bad. This guy is perfectly happy living in this little room in a chapel where most of us will probably be miserable, but he's okay with it because he's living his life in meditation. He's living his life for a higher purpose than himself. And he's perfectly content with it. Not only is he perfectly content with it, he's proud to show it off to people, that seem like they would really get it. And Joseph Campbell had been to that chapel so many times that he was finally like, he let him ring the bell, and then he let him, showed him his space. And, Joseph Campbell appreciated it. And he knew that Joseph Campbell would appreciate it. So I think, yes, there are myths. And yes, they are made up by human beings, but it doesn't mean that they're not valuable. And it allowed him to live his true life, and in his mind, his true purpose. Because the guy did not seem miserable at all. He seemed like perfectly happy. So that's all I have.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Any other comments?
If anyone has any questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. I don't think we have anybody, Brian. Oh, wait, Mark and Penny.
Okay, well, I was just want to thinking about what you were just saying, Evanique, about how this individual lived this spiritual life, and the fact that his bed was so arranged, or his room, that he looked out on the Black Madonna, means that he made a choice, and the Madonna must have meant something to him specifically. I get the feeling that the Madonna, Mary, suffered by her loss of Jesus eventually. And I'm wondering whether that choice that he made to, apparently from Campbell's perspective, to be so invested in this icon, and trying to imagine what that could have meant to him and how he may have identified with it.
Well, Joseph Campbell's talking about, he said anything could be a meditation. You could meditate on your money, or you could meditate on the Madonna. Do you think is one meditation more valuable or useful than the other? Is one more important, or should it have a higher priority?
Is that question to Mark or to everybody?
Everybody.
All right, I'll attempt to answer that one. I think is what speaks to you. I don't think it is one day. I think it's whatever speaks to the person and whatever resonates with them.
Anybody else? To wrap up, I'd ask a question.
Oh, sorry, Penny's next.
Sorry, okay.
Oh, I just wanted to say at the end when he was talking about, you know, the world as the next myth, as the planet and all the people on it, as basically one family of people. I was remembered a little bit because we've been studying some about Buckminster Fuller. And one of the things that really impressed me was his belief that, you know, we've reached a stage of development where we could provide a good standard of living for everybody on the earth. And so everybody could have a chance to realize their capacity, which would make things, you know, so much better on the world. And one of the things he's definitely said was that, you know, we needed to get rid of countries and borders to be able to have a world that worked for everybody. Because, you know, those were like artificial barriers and just created divisions among people rather than bringing them together. And so when Joseph Campbell was just talking about the world as the myth and basically everybody being one humanity, I just was like, oh, that's very similar to basically one of the core ideas of Buckminster Fuller. And it just seems, you know, we're very far from being able to adopt such attitude because there's the divisions are just still there, and every day it seems in the news, like with the recent war, instead of coming together, you know, these divisions are being set up as obstacles, huge obstacles, rather than, you know, trying to break down these type divisions.
Yeah, I think the visionaries really are, they all seem to agree on that point. And I would also agree. I think this global view is more and more, it's becoming an imperative. And anything else like the wars is a destructive distraction because of the urgency of this, the global views. The challenges we're presented with are global. The solutions, I think, need to be global. And when we're delayed and when urgent matters like wars impose different priorities other than the global, I think it's really destructive. We don't have time for that. We need to focus our energy, our resources on these more global issues. Because of the wars right now, people are building bombs and armored carriers and missiles and rockets of all sorts instead of windmills and solar panels, that sort of thing. So I don't know. It's just, I really agree with what Penny said. Anybody else?
Last chance if anybody has any questions or comments. You know, something you want to say. If you want to give feedback as well, that would be great. You can type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom.
While people are doing that, I'd like to say that I hope, I think the spirit in which Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell offered this series is that these discussions would help people feel empowered, clarify their thinking, direction to their action. And I hope that that you all feel that way too. I feel that the discussions that we've had have also been in that direction. Sometimes we get caught up a bit in the academics of it all, but I think the discussion tonight for me was really in line with the original intent of this series, and I appreciate and thank you all for that.
All right, we have Mark.
Yeah, thanks for leading it, Brian. And one of the things I was struck by in the last clip was his discussion of states of consciousness. And it made me think, and he mentioned the mantra as well, which made me think of Om. And Om as a sacred syllable, I think in the Upanishads is described as, really we think of it as OM, when in reality it's a conjunction consisting of A, U, and M. And each of the three letters A, U, and M signify a different state of consciousness. A signifying waking consciousness, U signifying dreaming consciousness, and M signifying non-dreaming sleeping consciousness. And I think it was really interesting. He kind of gave his own take on states of consciousness and suggested that through a mantra we can focus on something that is spiritually uplifting.
That's a great insight. I like that.
Okay. So if we don't have anything else, I would just like to talk about a couple meetups that are coming up. This Saturday at 2 p.m. And there will be a panel. Rob and Sherry. Oh my gosh, why can't I remember Trzynski? Rob and Sherry Trzynski, Joya, Maritza, and Shrikant will discuss Joseph Campbell. Not Joseph Campbell. Oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I'm sorry, guys. They will be discussing Louis Sullivan. They are breaking down the book. It's a short book. It's on the meetup page if you want to read it. It's 29 pages in his pictures, and they go into deep discussion about what they mean to them. So that will be Saturday at 2 p.m. Saturday at 5 p.m. there will be Asian Philosophies with Jason Ping. He does that a weekly series every Saturday. Just pulling it up really quick. All right, so I'm sorry, my phone is kind of like doing the spinning thing. Wait, sorry, I might be wrong because I don't see it on here. The Louis Sullivan series. But Saturday at 5 p.m., Asian Philosophies, Wu Zitang, it's Wu Zitang, Son, Daughter of Heaven, and there's a question mark there. So that'll be from 5 to 7 p.m. on Saturday. I don't know what we're doing for Bucky for Sunday yet. It's not listed, but just going to Tuesday at 8 p.m. continuing reading the Analects. Wednesday at 8 p.m. is Sigmund Freud's Civilization and Its Discontent with Phil. And then it's Saturday, October 28th. So I don't know if we're doing anything on October 21st for Louis Sullivan, but just to let you know, that's a series, and it's a system of architectural ornament. How does form follow function? But that will be on the 28th. So that's all I have. Thank you guys for joining us, and thank you, Brian, for preparing a great series.
Thank you for hosting.
Oh, anytime. My pleasure.
All right.
I get the easy part.
Next Thursday at same time.
Well, not next Thursday. It's
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yes. So the next one will be November. Wow, we're into November. I think it's November 2nd.
Brian, did you have to purchase the series to present it?
No. It's on YouTube.
Ah.
So thank you, everybody. And let me just say the next time, I was right. It's November 2nd. We will be meeting again to discuss. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you again. Good night.
Bye-bye.